When my mother became seriously ill, my wife gave me an ultimatum. Either I stop taking care of my mother or we get divorced. I made a choice. And after that came the hospital, the loss of our child, and the loss of my family.
My mom and dad were both orphans. My dad died 2 weeks before I was born, and my mom didn't really have a support system, so it was just the two of us. I never lacked anything, even though she worked her entire life just to give me the life I have today and never took time to build a new one for herself. She took any small job she could so we wouldn't go without. There were times she would skip meals so I could eat. I had good clothes while she had none. I watched her make sacrifice after sacrifice, always with a smile. I honestly thought she was an angel in human form. The only time she ever yelled at me was when I was 16 and caught her being sick while still forcing herself to work. I once told her I wanted to help by getting a job, but she got angry and told me it wasn't my responsibility to take care of her. She said it was her job to take care of me, and that I needed to focus on my grades so I could get into the best universities. That was the only way I could protect myself when she wouldn't be able to anymore. Even when I went to university, she didn't want me to work. She wanted me focused on my studies, but she did insist I volunteer, saying it was important that I become an adult who knew how to work with his hands. That's where I met my wife. We were both volunteering at the time. My wife is a good person, but she was never close to her parents or her siblings. From the moment she met my mother, though, she adored her. There were times I genuinely thought she loved my mom more than she loved me, and we even joked about it. Looking back, I think she was searching for the mother-daughter bond she never had with her own mother. After I finished my studies and found a job, we moved in together. At first, she wasn't comfortable with me calling my mom every day, even though those calls were only 10 or 15 minutes long, but eventually she stopped bringing it up. 2 years later, I bought a house for my mother. We'd never owned a place before. We'd moved from apartment to apartment our whole lives, and after everything she sacrificed, it felt like the least I could do. For me, it was non-negotiable. That's when the real problems with my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, started. She wanted me to think about us first. I told her that ever since I was a child, my dream had been to buy my mom a house, and that was something I had to do. She ended up complaining about it to my mom, even though my mom didn't know about the house yet. It was supposed to be a surprise for her birthday. My mom felt uncomfortable accepting it because of my wife and said it wasn't necessary, that we could use it for ourselves once we got married. I was furious. I told my mom the house was hers and she could do whatever she wanted with it, and that it was time she finally thought about herself. We managed to survive that conflict. We got married, and later on we bought our own house together. Things were going well until about 2 months ago when my mother fell ill. I wanted her to come live with us so I could take care of her, but my wife didn't want that. Instead, I decided to rent an apartment right next to our house with my own money, so I could be close to my mom and check on her every day. Even that didn't sit well with my wife. We don't have children, we both work. I usually get home around 6 in the evening, but since my mom got sick, I go see her and get home closer to 8. On weekends, I spend 1 or 2 hours with my mom and the rest of the time with my wife. We still go on dates. I always support her hobbies, even though she's never really taken part in mine. 2 days ago, she told me she'd been thinking and felt that I prioritized my mother too much. She said I had to choose between my mother and the life I wanted to build with her. The truth is, I never made her feel neglected. We both work, but I'm the one who cooks. I pay someone to help with the housework. I make the dishes she likes. She doesn't even know what I like to eat because I never complain. I run her baths, give her massages, buy her flowers, write her poems, and hide them around the house for her to find. We take trips once a month. I earn more money than she does, and I told her to keep her income for herself, while I handle all the bills, including hers. I always listen to her and take her opinions into account. I've always been easygoing and willing to adjust for her, but I realize that she tries to control everything, and the only thing I refuse to compromise on is my relationship with my mother. So now I'm planning to talk to her and set very clear boundaries, and if she doesn't accept them, then we're getting divorced. I just needed to get this off my chest. A lot of people ask me the same question. If I'm really not neglecting my wife, then what exactly does she want from me? Honestly, I ask myself that too. Every time I try to talk to her about it, she can't really explain it. She just says she feels that way. I think a lot of it comes from her own relationship with her mother. Her mother is extremely toxic and abusive. I've always tried to be there for my wife, to listen to her and support her, but almost every time I do, she ends up telling me that I can't understand her at all, simply because I have what she calls the perfect mother. I also want to be fair to her. When I first wrote my post, I was overwhelmed and angry, and I didn't do her justice. She really is a good person, not just with me, but with everyone around her. When I cook, she does the dishes. We also have a housekeeper. She stood by me when I had no money and supported me when I decided to start my own company. We generally get along very well. I've always told her that she was my family and that there were no sides because we were all on the same side. The irony is that she talks to my mom every day. She calls her mom. She buys her gifts more often than I do. She once even told me she wished she were her daughter. That's part of what makes this whole situation so confusing to me. I don't even remember ever presenting things as, "This is for my mom," or "This is my decision." But it's something I probably need to pay attention to. My wife has her own bank accounts and never consults me about how she spends her money. And I've always been fine with that. We also have shared accounts for daily expenses and major decisions, and those are things we discuss together. We each have our own savings as well. It's from my personal accounts that I rented the apartment near our house for my mom, or help friends when I can, or spend money on reasonable personal things. That's why I honestly don't understand where the problem is. What I do know is this: I will not put my mother aside when she needs me. That's a deal breaker for me. My first thought was to suggest therapy before making any final decision. And to those who accused me of treating my mother like a wife or having some kind of complex, I honestly don't even know how to respond to that. I don't have an Oedipus complex. You can relax. Yes, I'm a mama's boy. I call my mom for less than 15 minutes a day, and I see her every other Sunday. Apparently that makes me a terrible husband. Wanting my mom to stay with us while she recovered made me a monster, and renting an apartment next door so I could spend 2 hours a day with her while she's sick somehow made me even worse. Buying my mom a house before my wife and I were married was apparently unforgivable. Not completely handing over control of my relationship with my mother to my wife makes me a horrible human being. But you know what? I'm proud of how I've handled my relationship with my mother. I'm just a different kind of person. You can think whatever you want. I'll stay exactly who I am. Update. Before confronting my wife, I took some time to think, and I came to one very clear conclusion. I would never again allow anyone in my life to dictate what kind of relationship I should have with my mother, or how much time I should dedicate to her. So I decided to respond to the ultimatum. But before doing that, I wanted to know if there was anything else behind it. I asked her if there was another reason she hadn't told me about. She said no and asked me to get straight to the point. So I told her I wanted a divorce. She froze. She didn't say a word. She just stared at me. I think she was in shock. I told her everything that had been building up inside me, that our values were too different, that I was going through one of the worst moments of my life. My mother was sick. We had done multiple tests, and we still didn't know what she was suffering from. We didn't even know her family medical history because she was an orphan. The idea that I could wake up one day completely alone in the world terrified me. And in a moment like that, all I needed was my wife's support. But if my own wife believed that I should give less attention to my sick mother who needed me more than ever, then it was time for us to go our separate ways. She still didn't say anything, so I told her I was going to stay at a hotel for a while and that we would talk later about how to separate. I packed some of my things and left. The next day, when I went to see my mother, she could tell something was wrong, but I wasn't going to tell her that I was separating from my wife. She adored my wife, and with her being sick, I didn't want to add more pain to her life. I never discussed my marriage problems with my mother anyway. She had no idea what was going on, and my wife had always behaved like a loving daughter toward her, so I wasn't about to tell her what my wife had been thinking behind her back. That's when my mother mentioned that my wife hadn't come to see her that day. The same woman who was asking me to reduce my contact with my mother had been visiting her every single day. I had never asked her to do that. She called my mother Mom. When she was sick herself, She used to go to my mother so she could take care of her. Sometimes it hurt because it made me feel like I wasn't enough, but she always said that a mother's care was different. I understood it as her trying to build the mother-daughter bond she never had. She once told me that her own mother used to say she should never have been born, that she was an accident, and that she regretted not aborting her. Only a monster could say something like that to their child. So I never said anything when she sought my mother's affection. I felt like I had enough love to share. After I left home to study, my mother became a foster parent. She did that for years. I grew attached to those children, stayed in contact with them, and I consider them my siblings. Once a year, we all went on vacation together. My mother, the children, and my wife. I usually took 2 months off work each year. 6 weeks were dedicated entirely to my wife. The remaining 2 weeks I spent with my mother and the children, and even that felt like too much for her. When my mother told me my wife hadn't visited that day, I went back home, worried. I found my wife in the bathroom, fully dressed, her eyes red, as if she had been crying nonstop. Seeing her like that was unbearable. I helped her out, and then she completely collapsed. She cried for what felt like hours. She would calm down, then start crying again. I didn't say anything. I just stayed there. Eventually, she admitted the truth. She said she never actually wanted me to reduce my involvement in my mother's life. What she felt was jealousy. She was jealous of my relationship with my mother, jealous of the attention my mother gave to the foster children. She knew it wasn't rational, but she couldn't stop herself from wanting to be number one in my mother's heart. To her, it felt like a competition, and when I tried to take care of my mother, she didn't want me to be the one doing it. I was furious, but I stayed silent. We were talking about a seriously ill woman, and she was thinking about competition. Even if it meant sabotaging my relationship with my mother and pushing our marriage to the edge of divorce. She told me she was jealous of me and that if she had to choose, she would rather have been my mother's child than my wife. She said that even though I was the love of her life, she had always felt that only my mother could truly reach me. That no matter what happened, I remained stoic, as if I didn't need anyone, giving everything to others but never letting anyone fully reach me. At the time, I was so focused on the idea of competition that I didn't fully grasp what she was really saying. I listened until the end. I put her to bed, waited until she fell asleep, and then slept in another room. The next morning, she acted as if nothing had happened. She told me I didn't need to pity her. I told her it was out of love that she was still my wife. She went to work, and so did I, but I decided to stay at the hotel. During that time, I started questioning myself. Maybe she was right. Maybe this was a defense mechanism I'd had since childhood. Between the ages of 5 and 15, we moved more than 50 times, from apartment to apartment, from hotel room to hotel room. I never settled anywhere long enough to build lasting friendships. I think I learned to live every relationship as if it were temporary, as if I could be kicked out at any moment. I thought I had done better with my wife, but maybe I hadn't. I started to think that maybe divorce wasn't the answer and that what we really needed was therapy. Then everything got worse. A little over a week later, I got a call from the hospital. My wife had been admitted. She wasn't feeling well. When I went to see her, she refused to see me. The look in her eyes was something I had never seen before. Pure hatred. I contacted her friends so she wouldn't be alone, and then I told my mother. That's when my mother asked me what I had done to stress my wife so much, and why I would stress a woman who was pregnant. I was stunned. She explained that my wife had told her and asked her to keep it a secret, because she wanted to tell me herself when she was ready. I don't even know how to describe what was going through my head. Anger that my mother was the one who told me, happiness at the idea of becoming a father, and complete confusion all at once. I went to my wife and told her I knew. She looked at me with the same anger and said she had lost the baby and that it was my fault. In a single moment, I learned that my wife had been pregnant, that she had kept it from me, that I was going to be a father, and that the baby was gone, and that she blamed me for it. She asked me to leave, and I did. I've always wanted children. My wife always wanted to focus on her career. I accepted that. I tried to convince her over the years, but it never worked. And now she gets pregnant, doesn't tell me, tells my mother instead, and says I caused her miscarriage. She later said she hadn't told me because she wanted to see if I could handle all the responsibilities I take on and still raise a child. I don't understand her, and I admit that since then, I felt an intense anger toward her. I don't know how to look at her without feeling it. I don't want to hurt her with my words, so I stay silent. I take care of her at home, but we don't talk. I know I can't stay in this marriage. It's not possible. I started seeing a psychologist. He told me that patience was my best weapon, that I shouldn't make permanent decisions based on emotions that might be temporary, and that I should take time to see if anything could be salvaged. This is where I am now. I don't know if I'll post another update. I took time off work to be there for my wife and my mother, but I feel deeply depressed, and all I want right now is to get away from all of this. Update 2. After my wife had the miscarriage, yes, she was definitely pregnant, I had to take care of her because she couldn't manage on her own. After everything that had happened, all I felt inside was anger and hatred. But I kept telling myself that if something is fragile enough to break, you have no choice but to handle it gently. I didn't want her to break. I didn't want to leave her during the worst moment of her life. So I stayed, and I did what I believed was my duty as a husband. Despite that, her mental state kept getting worse. She started believing she was still pregnant. She talked to herself. One night she became delirious. She mistook me for her father and thought I was going to hurt her. I had to call emergency services. After the examinations, a psychiatrist advised that she be hospitalized. I agreed. She spent 6 weeks there. She was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. The doctors also suspected a delusional disorder. They believed she had been severely abused as a child, but that was all they were allowed to tell me. She didn't want to see anyone, especially her family. She suggested that we communicate through letters instead. Every time I visited, I would take a letter from her, and the next day I would bring mine. It sounds strange, but in those 2 months, I felt like I got to know her better than I had in the 10 years we spent together. It reminded me of the person she used to be, despite her flaws. She was genuinely kind. She used to travel to help build schools and wells, doing anything she could for people living in extreme poverty. She didn't just donate money, she worked with her own hands. She was the kind of person who would help a stranger who didn't speak the language catch their train, even if it meant missing her own. She had so much kindness in her. Even when we had money, we would take public transport just to remember the time when we had nothing, when simply being together was enough. We would travel without money and challenge each other to see how far we could get. Those were the best moments of our lives. We were close. We were in love. We truly believed nothing could ever break us. Through the letters we exchanged, we talked about many things. I won't go into the details. She took responsibility for her actions, and I took responsibility for mine. She apologized for how she treated me and accepted that divorce was the most likely outcome. She said she needed to heal and work on herself, and that it wouldn't be fair to keep me tied to her while she did that. She told me that given her condition, she didn't want me to be the one asking for a divorce. She felt she needed to make that decision herself. Some battles, she said, had to be fought alone. Otherwise, she would never become the best version of herself. She didn't know how long it would take, but she said that if one day she got there and I hadn't moved on, she would be happy to try again. I've always believed in fixing broken things rather than throwing them away. But people don't work like that. You can't fix someone unless they want to be fixed, and I didn't have the strength to fix anyone anyway. All my remaining energy was going into trying to fix myself. If my wife hadn't made the decision she did, I would have asked for a divorce myself. Ironically, it was because she made that decision that I began to see a small hope. Instead of divorce, I suggested a separation. I told her that in a year, if we still wanted to divorce, we would. But if we believed there was a chance to build something healthy, then we could try again, slowly, and do things differently. She agreed. When she was discharged from the hospital, she didn't want us to see each other. She said that if we did, she wouldn't have the strength to stick to her decision. I hadn't fully let go of the anger from everything that happened before her hospitalization either, so in the end, it was probably better for both of us. We continued writing letters to each other, and for now, that's enough. She was able to see my mother. She later wrote to me and told me what my mother had said to her, that she would always be a mother figure to her despite the mistakes she made, that she didn't need to compete for her love because she already had it, and that this would never change. She asked me if I was okay with her staying in touch with my mother. I told her that was between them and she didn't need my permission. She wouldn't be seeing her very often anyway because I had decided to take my mother to another country so she could receive treatment at one of the best hospitals in the world, in Europe. I've been in Germany for almost a month now. We're originally from France. I'm learning to delegate work, which was one of the goals I set during therapy. I needed therapy, and honestly, it was the people who followed my story who pushed me to start, and I'll always be grateful for that. The sessions were exhausting at first. I barely had the energy to do anything afterward, but over time, it got easier. I work remotely now. Once a week, I go back to France to take care of work matters and continue my therapy sessions. I didn't want to change therapists. I've started dedicating time just to myself, which is something I've never really done before. One of my foster brothers came with us to Germany since he can also work remotely. He's been a huge help. Slowly, I feel like I'm getting better. The hardest subject for me is my mother. I don't really want to talk about it, but I also know that talking about it is probably the only way I'll ever be able to face it. Years ago, we lived from apartment to apartment, from hotel to hotel. Those were some of the worst years of our lives. The state always managed to find us somewhere to sleep because we were a single mother and a child. It was never stable, but it was better than sleeping outside. My mother was, and still is, a very beautiful woman. I witnessed men make sexual propositions to her in exchange for an apartment, right in front of me. I don't know exactly what she went through with my father, but she never wanted to be with another man. She used to say that death doesn't stop a loving relationship from continuing. There was an organization that helped us by finding places for us to stay at night. One day, a man who worked there offered to let us stay in his apartment temporarily until they found us something better. We were living in an unsanitary hotel at the time. My mother didn't want to go, but I convinced her. All I could think about was sleeping in a warm bed. After dinner at his place, he started making advances toward my mother. She stopped him immediately. He told us that either she accepted or we had to leave. So we left. When we returned to the hotel, our room had already been given to someone else. There was nothing we could do that night, so we slept outside. At some point during the night, while we were sleeping, we were woken up by a group of men. They tried to rape my mother. They hit me so hard that I was too afraid to even try to help her. I just froze. Eventually, some other men, I think they were coming back from a party, heard the screams and came to help. The attackers ran away. For years, I always said that my mother was almost raped. That's the story I told. It's the story I believed myself. But the truth is, she was raped. She was raped right in front of my eyes, and I couldn't do anything. Saying it out loud now is the first time I've ever fully admitted it. Sometimes I wonder if things would have been different if that night we had collapsed into each other's arms and cried together. But that's not what happened. She stood up, took my hand, and told me that this place wasn't safe, and that we needed to find somewhere safer. That was all she said. We never talked about that day again. We continued with our lives as if nothing had happened. Things eventually got better. She worked relentlessly so I could succeed. She invested every bit of money she earned throughout her life into my project, and today, I owe her the company I built. I often ask myself how she survived what she went through. Ever since I fully accepted what happened to her, all I've wanted is to talk to her about it. But this isn't about me. It's about her. She's the one who lived through the worst of it. I would like to talk to her about it one day, but I don't know what good it would do after all these years. For now, I don't have that answer. What I do know is that her condition is improving, and for the first time in a long while, the future looks brighter than it did just a few months ago.
Let me know what you think about this story in the comments. Do you think the author made the right choice? How do you see his wife's behavior? Was it justified, or did she cross a line? I'm genuinely interested in hearing your thoughts. If you enjoyed this format, please support the video with a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching until the end. I'll see you in the next story.